Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries today. In just a moment, we'll be sharing with you the latest in what's going on in the world of Christian ministry and outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Well, welcome to Raceway Ministries Today. Raceway Ministries Today, of course, is the podcast presentation of the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And if you need to know more about Raceway Ministries, you can contact us. You can get in touch with me, Roger Marsh, the director, at 940-367-4940, or you can reach me by email, rogermarsh13@gmail.com. If you need more information about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, you can always go to our website, racewayministries.org, or you can follow us on Facebook at National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and then we have our YouTube channel that goes by the same name. It's a pleasure today to be able to talk to and tap into the wisdom and experience of Greg Berkey. Greg is the founder and the director of Auto Racing Outreach. He also serves as pastor at the Community Baptist Church in Hickory, North Carolina. And he and his wife, Rhonda, and son live nearby in Claremont, North Carolina. Their daughter recently moved to the Nashville area, and I was able to have Greg at our Nashville Raceway Ministries effort there at the Nashville Super Speedway not too long ago. And he preached for us in the campground there and worked with us on golf carts and doing other things, and had the opportunity to visit with his daughter there in the Nashville area. And Greg also has served as the executive director of the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Greg, it's great to have you on the line this morning. How are things out there in North Carolina today?
Roger, it's great to be on the phone with you and to talk with you again. It's great to see you guys and to be with you there in Nashville last month, and that was really, really special. But we're doing great here in North Carolina. Beautiful day.
Great. Well, listen, having just completed a ministry weekend up there in Loudon, New Hampshire, you were out there with the fans, sharing the gospel with them and others during the NASCAR weekend there at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. I can't wait to hear about how the weekend went, how your trip went. I think some of the previous comments that we had toward each other, you alluded to the fact that you even had some ministry opportunities on the trip going to and from Loudon, and so that's kind of exciting. Glad you made it back home safely. But I've got to ask you, just in general, how did the trip and the weekend ministry go up there at New Hampshire?
It went really well. It's a long drive up there from where we are, about 1,000 miles up there and 1,000 miles back. And so, we travel a lot with the family. And so we have a truck and we've got a travel trailer, and we try to keep everybody together. And we've done that for the last 20 years, which makes it special for all of us. And so kind of took our time going up, and we've got a new sponsor up in that area that he really wanted to meet with us. And so he took care of the finances for the trip for us, and we appreciate that. And then the actual ministry went very, very well. And I had not been to New Hampshire for probably about 12 years.
Okay.
And so it's great to be back again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things I've always admired about you and Rhonda and the family is y'all do a lot of traveling together, and ministry is really kind of a family affair. Talk a little bit about your family. Tell us about Rhonda, her involvement in the ministry there. Tell us about how your children are doing. I know your daughter recently moved to Nashville. How's the family doing?
We're all doing very, very well. Seth graduated high school. Of course, he has Asperger's, and so we keep him pretty close with us. And
oh, yeah, sure.
And so he graduated high school this year.
Good,
so actually, it's going to kind of free us up here a little bit to do more traveling in the future. But,
yeah,
when we started the ministry years ago, even before we entered into motorsports ministry, Ron and I decided that we're going to do this together. And do this as a family. And so that's what the Lord wanted us to do. And so I'll be honest with you, Hannah, who's now moved to Nashville to work with another Christian ministry, she was in a conference there. She says, you know what, this reminds me of what I used to do at the other conferences and as we traveled with Raceway Ministries. So she learned a lot, in Raceway Ministries ministry and what she's doing now. And so it's been good.
Well, good. You have invested a lot into your family, and that's such an admirable trait, because I have known people through the years who have gotten involved in not only racing ministry, ministry, but also church ministry, and they kind of take it as a separate thing from their family and don't include family at all. But as you just described, a lot of what you did with Hannah prepared her for what God has for her even now.
Exactly.
And it was great to see. I believe, if I recall, you had a video that you recorded up in New Hampshire, and I think Seth was right there by your side there as you were recording the video and telling about the ministry that was going on. And at the annual meetings that I attended when you were executive director, it was always a pleasure to see your family. So, just for all of our listeners out there, I think it'd be great for them to understand and know that ministry is very much a family affair. If you're involved in ministry and have a family, it's inevitable. You've got to include your family. If you don't, I think it's a big mistake. And Greg, you have been a great model for that through the years, and I appreciate and respect you for that for sure. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Auto Racing Outreach? I know you have shared with me some of that before, but how did it all get started? How did God speak to your heart and draw you into this incredible ministry? It's a little bit different than National Fellowship or Raceway Ministries. We have different groups and they're located in different areas, but you actually, through the years, have picked up and traveled and gone to ministry locations to either do ministry on your own at a raceway or to supplement what our raceway ministry teams do at their individual venues. So how did all that get started, and how has that become who you are and what you do?
It really goes back to my youth. I grew up about 15 minutes away from the Indianapolis 500.
Okay.
In a little town called Pittsboro, Indiana, which was also the same hometown of Jeff Gordon.
Yeah.
And so his home was about 5 miles from my house, and so he was always the hometown hero. So when Jeff Gordon got into NASCAR, I began following NASCAR, switching over basically from IndyCar racing.
Yeah, sure.
And had a love for it, and basically rooted for Jeff Gordon, and I began wearing. For 16 years, we were missionaries in Nova Scotia, Canada, church planters, and had a youth camp up there.
Okay.
And what I would do as a ministry, basically, is I was wearing a Jeff Gordon jacket everywhere I went. And everywhere I went, I noticed that began conversations.
Hey, there you go.
And then at that time, too, Jeff Gordon happened to have back then a gospel tract. And so we probably passed out thousands of those back in the day. And then 2001, when we were in Nova Scotia, Dale Earnhardt, of course, passed away at Daytona. We had a family there in Nova Scotia that used to be very opposed to our ministry and our being there. And matter of fact, their grandkids used to come to our Bible clubs on Tuesday nights that our church had, and they told their grandkids, if you continue to go there, don't come to our house anymore.
Oh, wow.
Until the day that Dale Earnhardt passed away. And they were both huge Dale Earnhardt fans for 20-some years. And after he passed away, he calls me and said, we know that you're a racing guy. And he said, we don't have the opportunity to go down to see the Dale Earnhardt memorials to say our goodbyes, because we had him in our living room, for over 20 years, and we felt like he was a part of our family. So would you be willing to hold a memorial service here for us in Canada? So we put that together. They came, and lo and behold, his wife got saved as a result of that. And then they come to church. And so at that time, he began to invite me to their local tracks up there in Canada. And the Lord laid upon our hearts in 2001 to become a chaplain for what was at that time called the Pro Stock Tour for the Maritimes.
Okay.
And that's where chaplain ministry began.
Mm-hmm.
Did that for 5 years, and then we used to have an American touring racing series come over to us and race called the Pass Series, which they are still involved today in the northern states and also southern tours. So then I became the chaplain for the Pass Southern Tour. Then that kind of opened the door for us to meet up. So I started Auto Racing Outreach 20 years ago.
Right.
With all of this, and with the goal to reach race fans for Christ and do chaplain ministry with the teams.
Yeah.
And so when we came back to America in 2006, I thought I was on my own. All I knew was Motor Racing Outreach, and I didn't realize that there was a whole other ministry that did fan outreach. And so I went to Charlotte, met up with the Tates, met them there, and they invited me to come involved with their ministry. And lo and behold, I found out there was a national fellowship.
Oh.
And so then I met you, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago at the first meeting that I went to, and the Lord just began to open the doors for national travel then.
Ah, good.
So I remember you and I meeting together at a Finish a Winner event that we organized with McDonough Motorsports. and then started doing show cars for them and traveling with them and operating that for different ministries across the country. And so that's kind of where it all began, brother.
Wow. Well, I tell you, I can recall the first time I met you, I was impressed with your stability, your solid theology, your sincere desire to reach people. You weren't a showboat. I mean, you didn't come flying in the room like, look at me. It was with a servant's heart and a servant's attitude. And I got to tell you, Greg, you haven't changed a bit. You're just as solid and stable as you have ever been, and God has done a remarkable work. I'm just so thankful that God allowed our pathways to cross. And, we've had opportunity to do ministry together at some of the Finish Your Winter events, and then also at Daytona and Texas and a few other venues, and it's just been a real pleasure. And I want to just say to you how much I appreciate your leadership during some transitions that we have gone through with National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. And I'll tell you why. It was a serious transition time because COVID came along and the pandemic came along, and what a time to have good, solid, stable servant leadership. And I want to commend you for guiding and directing National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries through some of those times, because going into the pandemic and then now coming out of it, you were the perfect person to help us in the middle of that. And I just want to say thank you. Talk a little bit about National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and this isn't a big promo or advertisement for NFRM, but just from your perspective, you said you stepped into a situation where you discovered suddenly there was a larger group out there that was involved in fan ministry. How did National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries open your eyes to that, and what was your reaction? And how about opportunities to serve around the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries circuit? You've already talked about how it came about, but how did it actually work? How did it feel to you as kind of an independent out there discovering that there was a network of people doing ministry like you? How did that feel to you?
It was huge to me. And I know that a lot of folks in the Raceway Ministries, and especially at the local track level, that a lot of times you feel alone, like nobody else is out there. And when we came to that very first, I believe it was in Nashville, was my very first conference I learned about.
I think you're right, yes.
And showed up there and found out that, wow, there's this big, huge group all across the country that we have the same heart and we have the same motivation behind us to do the same thing, and to meet all these people and to see all these different ministries. I was so greatly encouraged. And then also with the fellowship that began to open doors for me personally into auto racing outreach for contacts across the country to do ministry with them.
Yes.
For our ministry, we're just kind of a boots on the ground. That's kind of how God has designed me. Just get out there and be a servant and go out to these different various battlegrounds, where we're fighting Satan for souls.
Yeah.
And what an opportunity that NASCAR's provided and motorsports has provided for us to be out there.
Yes, yes.
And so I thought, this is where I want to be. And these are great people. I mean, and I know when it comes to Raceway Ministries, these folks are not in it for fame. They're not in it for money. They volunteer. A lot of them are using their own resources a lot of times to do this. And, they just have the right heart for it. And that's my kind of people.
Yeah, I'm with you. Listen, you're exactly right. Some of the best people I've met in my entire years of ministry have been Raceway Ministries folks. And I think the reason is because exactly what you said. They're in it because they want to be in it. They're in it because they're ready to make sacrifices. They're ready to donate their time. They're ready to give. These are people with servants' hearts. And I've noticed through the years, the ones who are in it to make an impression and make a name for themselves, they don't last very long.
True.
Because they realize after a while, this is a servant thing. This is a boots on the ground deal. And you just can't insert your ego into it. It just doesn't work. And I think that's why you have been such a great fit, because your philosophy, your approach to ministry dovetails right into the approach that's needed out there in the motorsports world. Now, in light of that, obviously, lots of opportunity for you down through the years, and you've already mentioned some of the ways that God used you in the midst of National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, networking and so forth, to go to different places, and you still do that. What about 2021? What kind of opportunities has God brought about for you this year?
Well, coming out of COVID, of course, has been challenging for all of us, and that includes us too.
Sure.
the beginning of the year, still the lockdowns are pretty hard, but now things are beginning to open back open again. And so we're trying to navigate, okay, what do we do now specifically? We did show cars for so many years, and yet things have changed where liability insurance is so hard for that and travel with that. And so what we have done for 2021 is that we're concentrating on doing our gospel hero cars that we work with several drivers with, Jordan Anderson and Michael McDowell and David Reagan and different ones, and some new ones coming along too. We also have started doing local track drivers that are asking to use those now as well.
Good.
So we're glad to print those up custom and to put the Plan of Salvation on the back, and they end up, a lot of drivers autographing those. And so our philosophy behind using those is that we know that fans keep that stuff.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
And so, they may not read it at the track and be busy, but a lot of times when the busyness of life at the track is gone and they're back to their own solitude in their own homes with their own struggles, that gospel is inside their house.
Yeah.
And so we've concentrated a lot this year on doing those. We've probably printed hundreds of thousands of gospel literature, and so we still do that today.
Good.
Our philosophy this year, since we don't have the show car, is that we found out that if you can get a hold of NASCAR diecast cars, and this year we have been working with Lionel Racing, and they've offered us, the 1/64 scale usually runs $8 to $11 for a new one.
Right.
Well, they have some old stock that we found out about that's a couple of years old, and they've been giving those to us for $2.99 a piece.
Oh, wow.
So we had a sponsor that was greatly concerned, about investing. So they invested thousands of dollars through us to purchase those. So what we did, even at Loudon this past weekend, is go in the campgrounds, take our diecast cars, take our gospel cards, and we just walk up from trailer to trailer, say, hey, would you like a free diecast car and some hero cards? And we hardly ever turned away.
Oh, I can imagine, yeah.
And they're nice, and the fans just really appreciate it, and opens up conversation opportunities.
Sure.
So that's kind of what we've done this year.
Wow.
And it's worked really well.
Well, you're out there with the fans. You're out there with the sport. You've watched the trends of NASCAR come and go and shift around to different kinds of emphases. You've seen the campgrounds full. You've seen the campgrounds dwindle in size. You know what's going on out there. And to be sensitive to what people respond to and to act on that is a great way to approach it. Now, part of the reason I say that is I recently had a conversation with someone that does ministry at a NASCAR venue, and they talked about how things are changing out there, and the crowds aren't as big as they used to be in the campgrounds. So it's a need to shift ministry to meet the current needs in the specific campgrounds at the specific speedway. You've been about that for a long time, and so to be able to sense those trends and respond to it, I think is a must for effective Raceway Ministries work. The diecast car idea, that's always a winner. I mean, I don't know of anybody that's going to turn down a diecast car.
Yeah.
Now, not only children, but even adults.
Absolutely.
All of us guys, I'm 69 years old. I still love to get diecast cars,
Sure.
And to get a Michael McDowell hero card with his autograph on it. I mean, you got a Daytona 500 winner there with an autograph. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
Sure.
What a great way to get the gospel out. But I know, Greg, you do more than that, because I've seen pictures from Charlotte, where you were earlier this year, preaching on a Sunday morning. And then, of course, in Nashville. You showed up there in Nashville, and with a typical servant's attitude, you were out on a golf cart, suffering in the infield, taking fans to the luxury suites that they had there, but serving the Lord there, And then what a great sermon you preached on Sunday morning there in the campground at Nashville. Just outstanding. So God just continues to bring great opportunities to you and Auto Racing Outreach. And obviously New Hampshire was one of them. You already referred a little bit to what you did in New Hampshire. What are some of the other things that occurred while you were up there in Loudon last weekend? Yeah,
we had the privilege of going over. It took me a while to find it since we had not been there a number of years. But, Raceway Ministries have been there for a number of years. and found where their tent was. And a fellow named John White, who has been there for 12 years, has brought in a ministry team called Rise Again Ministries.
Okay.
And so they had their tents up, and when I got there, they were busy making breakfast for the campers and for some of the track staff. And that was a last-minute deal for them because the track just notified them at the very last minute that they were going to be allowed to do that.
Oh, okay.
And too, is that New Hampshire has always been known for their huge Pinewood Derby.
Yeah.
That they offer for the kids. Well, the track did not allow them to do that this year.
Okay.
But I learned a lot from them about Pinewood Derby there. Is what they do is that when the parents come with the kids to register them for the event, they give them the gospel at the table there in some form or some manner.
Good.
And then again, they go through the pre-race ceremonies and they get the gospel there again.
Yeah.
And then what I was always impressed with is that they get professional trophies done that are taller than the kids.
Wow.
They make a big deal out of this thing, and that is what they're known for. So,
that's awesome. Wow.
So we got to get contact with them, and then because they threw things together so quickly there, we gave them some of our resources too. We gave them boxes of the die-cast cars and some hero cars there too, and so it was good in that way.
Well, I hope they get to do the Pinewood racing again sometime soon.
Right.
Man, if they pull out all the stops and do it like that, that's got to be impressive to the kids and to their families, and what a great opportunity to share the gospel in the midst of all that.
Right.
Anything else at New Hampshire that stands out?
I forgot how beautiful it is up there. Man, what beautiful country. Yeah. And, it was just good to see everything open back up again. And I had a meeting as well with a new sponsor up in that area, so he's getting things together.
Good.
And so we'll be back up there again. So
awesome.
That's about it, brother.
Okay, well, listen, speaking of sponsors, talk a little bit about auto racing outreach and where you are in terms of your ministry. Particularly, what do you need? I mean, if someone were listening and they were saying, man, I really like what Greg Berkey is saying about what he does with auto racing outreach, how can I help? Obviously, sponsorship would be huge. That's always a welcome thing, of course. But what are some needs that you have with auto racing outreach that it might be helpful for somebody to know specifically? What do you need there with ARO?
We could actually use, and I was just talking to our new sponsor up in New Hampshire about this, is that as the ministry goes forward, that I also pastor a church in Hickory. And
yes.
And that kind of limits my opportunities to be out there. So when you get invitations to do other events and other responsibilities at tracks, some of them I have to turn down.
Yeah.
It would be great, and I've talked with some other guys about this, is that we also want to do a show car again, and we're looking at those possibilities. But if somebody wants to volunteer to drive our truck and show car or the other events that I can't get to,
okay,
we could use some help in that way, and run the ministry. So,
okay.
All
right. Well, you mentioned your congregation there in Hickory, Community Baptist Church. How long you been there? You're pastor of the congregation. What's it like to juggle those responsibilities with the opportunities that you get for ARO? You already mentioned that there sometimes are conflicts and you can't go to all the events that you've been asked to be a part of with auto racing outreach. So how do you juggle all of that? How are things there at the church?
We've been there for 7.5 years now, and we took a church that only had about 12 people in it, and they were struggling. And so I was filling pulpit when we were not on the road. And so I told them, I said that, we travel quite a bit. And so they said that, well, still come. We want you to be our pastor, and we'll work around all of that. And they've been fantastic. They support us financially, and they do a lot. And so I've got another pastor friend of mine that fills the pulpit when I'm gone.
Oh, good.
And it works out really, really well. And our folks are just really great about all of that. And it's a challenge for sure.
Well, I know it is a challenge. I've done it a couple of times in my career with Raceway Ministries work. I remember when I pastored a little church up in Tioga, Texas, sometimes I would go to the Saturday night race at Bristol. And the way it worked was on the Saturday night after the race was over in Bristol in August, I would drive back down to Knoxville and stay in a little hotel next to the airport, catch a flight at 6 a.m. out of the Knoxville airport, hit the tarmac at DFW at about 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, and then drive as fast as I could to Tioga to be there in the pulpit to preach at 11.
Yeah, I've done that.
Sometimes you just have to handle it that way.
Yeah.
But what a blessing it is whenever you're you're able to not have those conflicts. And Greg, I know you're humble enough that you probably would never mention this, but how awesome would it be if you had enough sponsorship to give you the freedom to do nothing but auto racing outreach, and that alone? Not to say that you don't love your congregation, and not to say that you don't love serving God in the local church, because I know you do, and I know you do a faithful job. I've watched some of your sermons on your Facebook page, and it's very obvious that you have a commitment to that congregation. But if God has called you to do Raceway ministry, and that's a burning desire in your heart, I think it would be awesome if someone or some combination of people would step up and say, I want to sponsor auto racing outreach to the point that Greg can be on the road as much as he needs to. Would that be anywhere near your heart's desire ultimately?
Yeah, ultimately that is the goal, and so we'd love to be able to do that. It's hard to have a dual vision, in your heart in two different places.
It is,
to get the
yes.
job done correctly. And in all honesty, sometimes we feel bad that we're hurting the church in this way. That you get visitors come and they realize that I'm on the road half the year and they never come back, because of that. And so it's hard for the church to grow that way as well. So it'd be great that the Lord will provide in His timing.
Well, it is in His timing, and I would just certainly invite all of our listeners to pray with us that God might arrange that. And I think, like you said, it would be for the benefit of auto racing outreach. It would be for the benefit of the congregation as well. So pray with us, all listeners, that God might provide some funding and some sponsorship to allow that to happen. Now, as far as the rest of 2021, what's in store for auto racing outreach? What do you have on schedule?
We're probably going to be heading to Indy in a couple of weeks. That's my hometown, and of course Paige Johnson is up there, and and Paige is a great girl and doing a great job with her contacts in Indy. So we're going to contact her and see what she's going on, and we always have a church up there that sponsors us for that event as well. And so looking forward to that. And then going back to getting into like September, you're looking at Darlington and going back to Richmond, Bristol, all those events once again. So the fall hits the East Coast again pretty busily, and so we'll be gearing up for that. And we're also working with Alan Huffman, our late model driver down here, and of course working with Tri-County Speedway and helping out John Abernathy at Tri-County, and so we do a weekly ministry day with him. And so we're pairing up. Actually, we got this Hickory gang, and we're looking forward to putting some new ministries together. And Alan, hopefully, I'll announce this now, Alan and I are going to hopefully do an auto racing outreach sponsored car for him in October.
Good.
And we get to use that hopefully for a show car and some events and some ministry too. And so that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, good deal. The Hickory Gang, I like that term. You and John and Alan out there doing ministry at Hickory Speedway and Tri-County Speedway. I can only imagine how exciting that must be. I try to envision that. John Abernathy is a nonstop talker. You're kind of quiet, and Alan's kind of all over the place. So I bet y'all have a lot of fun out there.
Well, somebody's got to be the quiet one and listen,
That's exactly right. Somebody's got to be the stable, steady, predictable guy, so you're the guy.
I'm the guy.
Listen, Raceway Ministries work. A lot of people fascinated by it. They want to get involved. And in fact, in reality, we have several different speedways where we need to start Raceway Ministry teams. We got one started up in Nashville, of course, a few weeks ago, and you were there. We're looking now at some opportunities at Road America up in Elkhart, Wisconsin. And then we have needs at Pocono and Phoenix and several other locations. For people who might be interested in getting involved, or even for people who currently are involved in Raceway Ministries work, what are some choice pieces of advice that you might offer from your experience to help them understand how Raceway Ministries work really goes?
Yeah, sometimes we actually get phone calls or emails that they learn about auto racing outreach, and they're someplace and they'd like to get involved. My first piece of advice to them is, number one, you got to make contact with Raceway Ministries because it's a national organization and it's been around for a long, long time. And so you got to make room for the conference in January. If you want to know how this really works and the philosophy and how to do it right, you really need to meet up with other people with the same heart and get the training for it and the background for it and understand how this works. And so to me, that is first priority there. In telling folks how to get involved. Yeah. And that's why we love NFRM so much.
Yeah, and let me just inject something here because the camaraderie, the togetherness, the fellowship, the worshiping together, sitting around the table eating snacks or meals together, you can't replace that. I'm all over Zoom meetings. I get involved in a lot of them. We even had a virtual conference this past January for our annual meeting. But you can't replace that getting together and hearing the stories that others tell. So I would just say a big amen to what you just said. Make contact with Raceway Ministries people. You'll learn a lot and you'll be inspired. So amen to that, Greg. Anything else that you would offer as advice?
And then, the website is huge, too, for Raceway Ministries. If somebody wants to get involved, whatever state they're involved with, go to that site and find out where they are locally, or even your local track and whatnot. And so the opportunities are there. They're endless, and we're needing more and more people. Our generation is getting not younger.
That's true, yeah.
And we're having some good young people join up.
Yeah, we are.
That have a real burden, and so that's been very encouraging. But we're going to need more of that going forward. As long as the doors are open in motorsports, we've got to be there. We've got to
I love that point that you just made. A lot of people say, well, NASCAR's heyday is gone. There's not sellout crowds. They're closing some of the campgrounds. And a lot of people would look at that and say, well, our opportunity is gone from motorsports now because it's just kind of fading a little bit. I would argue against that. And I would say what you just commented on is right on target. Motorsports, I don't think, is going to go away. And whatever the crowd size is or whatever the car count might be at the Speedway, however big or small, there is a need. And it's a mission field.
Yes.
And, man, I appreciate your perspective on that. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What else, Greg? What other advice would you offer?
Again, you've got to get training. One of the biggest things for me when we were brand new with Auto Racing Outreach here is that you need to understand what to do at tracks and what not to do at tracks.
Yeah.
And you've got to understand, that we are there as servants to the track. Getting the understanding too of the philosophy of the track allowing you to be there. Number one, is a privilege. It's a privilege. Yep. This is not a right for us to be there, and so we don't go in there with the attitude that, I'm going to ask for this and ask for that, and it's not wrong to ask, or I should say, go in and make demands.
Yes, right.
No, we just offer our services and what we can do to help them and be a blessing, because from a track perspective, fans are money. This is a business.
Yeah, that's right.
And so how can we help serve your fans and make it better for these folks? And at the same time, when you do that, the Lord opens the door for the gospel, and the Lord just blesses it.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. Well, I think we could do an entire podcast on how to shoot yourself in the foot with Raceway Ministries, because the longer I am in this, the more I'm heartbroken when I hear stories about how Raceway Ministry groups have forfeited their opportunity because of attitudes or because of the way they strut into the track and offer demands, or just things like that. You're so right. We have to go in there remembering we're your guests and servants. So good stuff. Well, listen, Greg, any other thoughts that you might want to share with us about Auto Racing Outreach, about Raceway Ministries? For our listeners, we're talking to Greg Berkey. Greg is the director and founder of Auto Racing Outreach, has plenty of experience and lots of wisdom to offer to anybody that might be involved in or want to get into Raceway Ministries type work. Greg, in light of that, before you share any final thoughts, what's good contact information for you? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to offer support, sponsorship, or they just need to ask questions about Raceway Ministries and how it works, or if they want to line up an event with you? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Probably through our website, autoracingOutreach.com. All of our contact information is there, and we respond to that as well, and so that would be the best thing to do.
All right, so anyone listening that might want to get in touch with Greg, just simply go to autoracingOutreach.com. And Greg will be more than happy, I'm sure, to share with you what God has taught him and the experiences that God has provided for him, and certainly would be receptive to any sponsorship or funding or donations or any other things that you might want to offer. Greg, any final thoughts that you might like to share?
My final thought would simply be this. I just thank the Lord for the opportunity. I thank the Lord for NFRM, for Raceway Ministries, for the privilege to give this blessed gospel that we have to race fans who need it so desperately in this avenue to be able to do it. Appreciate so much, Roger, your leadership and your friendship through all these years. And really, we have so many friends all across the country at so many different tracks, and it's not just friendships, it's really family.
Yeah.
And just so appreciative, and we thank the Lord for y'all.
Well, we're thankful for you, Greg. Every time I read through the book of Acts and I read about the Apostle Paul and his missionary travels and the people that he meets in different places and the missionary partners that he had along with him, Luke and Timothy and different ones, I always think about Raceway Ministries' work. And I think about the expansive network of people that we have across the United States, from California to Maine and down to Florida and over to Texas, people everywhere. It's beyond friendship. I truly look at you and others that we met as partners in ministry, and it's just a great bond that we have, and appreciate you a lot. So glad that you're involved in Raceway Ministries work, and so glad that God allowed our pathways to cross.
Amen.
So, Greg, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you so much for all the thoughts that you have shared, and we'll just continue to pray that God will provide for your needs, for the needs of Auto Racing Outreach, and pray that God will continue to provide for all of us as we move along and serve Him in the motorsports world. So, Greg, thank you. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, Brother Roger.
All right, you bet. We have been talking with Greg Berkey. You can reach him at autoracingoutreach.com. He is the founder and director of that ministry, and also pastors over in Hickory, North Carolina, lives there in nearby Claremont, and has great opportunities to serve the Lord all across the country through Auto Racing Outreach. So if you need to get in touch with him, please do. Meanwhile, we are the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for listening. If you need more information about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, you can go to racewayministries.org, or, as we said earlier, you can find us on Facebook at National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, or you can go to our YouTube channel by the same name. We look forward to having you back for our next podcast. And meanwhile, as we all journey through the road course of life, we look forward to being in victory lane with you. All of that made possible because of our faith and trust in what God has provided through the Lord Jesus Christ. So until next time, we pray that God will bless each and every one of you. We'll see you at our next podcast. We hope you'll tune in next time as we continue to explore Christian ministry and outreach in motorsports through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. If you'd like to learn more about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, visit our website at racewayministries.org. Follow us on Facebook under the name National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Check out our podcast and videos found on our National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries YouTube channel. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us for this presentation of Raceway Ministries Today.